Welcome to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz. This episode we're going to be talking about Black Lives Lost. And with me I have a couple of people who have worked on the issue of violence against black people for many years. I have Jamala Rogers with the Organization for Black Struggle, and I have Zaki Baruti with the Universal African Peoples Organization. I want to welcome both of you to the show. I think we had a show on a very similar topic about 17 years ago, one of the first Green Times. The three of us were together, and the issues, what goes around comes around.
Absolutely.
And so, what tell me about an issue which St. Louisans have heard of or might remember is Marilyn Banks. What happened to Marilyn Banks?
Well, that was a case in which a police officer named Joseph Ferrario had responded to a call for a little incident involving a couple of teenagers. And according to our sources, that he knew the lady that he was getting ready to intervene that had a little misunderstanding with another female. She took off running down the street, and he chased after him, pulled his weapon. This is on an August day, summer day, and a lot of the residents sent out.
It was in 1980s, wasn't it?
83.
83.
Pulled his weapon out and shot several shots and missed the young lady who was running away, but shot a young lady, a mother, a daughter who was sitting on her porch minding her business, named Marilyn Banks.
Okay.
And that really outraged the community. There were mass demonstrations back at that particular time.
And this was St. Louis. This was
actually in St. Louis.
In terms of the modern era, this is what really pulled together a group that was opposed to police violence.
Right. There was the formation of the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression, of which Jamala and myself are some of the original founders of that, and we've been struggling ever since then.
Since 1983?
Since 1983.
Okay. And Jamala, what happened? Did the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression sort of become less active after that incident?
Well, there were three goals that we had, and all but one of them we had achieved. I mean, we wanted to create a trust fund for the surviving children, and we did that. Plus, there was a settlement based on a lawsuit. We got Joseph Ferrario fired, and then we said we wanted to end police violence. So that we knew that was going to take a while, but we did get the 2 out of 3, and you know, made history because it was the first time in St. Louis that an officer had been indicted. Even though he wasn't convicted, he was indicted.
But he was indicted.
He was indicted. They moved his case to Kansas City, where he was acquitted. The other historic thing that happened was the amount of the lawsuit. That was the first time that level of money had been given to a victim of police violence.
Okay, and tell me what happened with Garland Carter. That was quite a while after that, wasn't it?
Oh, definitely. Garland Carter was shot. I believe it's in the back.
In the back of the head and in the buttocks.
Yeah, so he was, obviously running away from the police officer, which was another reason why that police case gained so much, attention, because it was clear that there was no threat to the police officer. This person was running away, young black man, had no gun, and so again, outrage, maybe not as much as in the Marilyn Banks case, but still a case that marks the continuum of police incidents regarding black lives.
And if I may add too, that the officer who was involved in the shooting, he was also fired, and they found unauthorized weapons based on them finding unauthorized weapons in the trunk of his police car.
Unauthorized weapons, and are those the sorts of weapons that are sometimes used to throw down weapons where
absolutely.
A policeman says that I had to shoot him because he was going to shoot me, and so the gun is just tossed down above the body.
And just to back up, Joseph Ferrario had the same problem, except he was so stupid he didn't have bullets in his clip. So he said, this is the gun that the juvenile was shooting at me, and then when they looked at it, it was no bullets there. So this was cooked at that point. But we had always been saying that there were throw down guns, there were drugs that were kept in the car so that they had them for these kinds of incidents. And so those two cases definitely prove that.
Okay, well, let's fast forward over a decade, and let's go to the case of Carey Ball. What happened with him?
Carey Ball's situation was a young young black male who was in college doing extremely well at Forest Park Junior College. And unfortunately, the police pulled him over and he sped away. And he had a prior felony. And we speculate that maybe the fear of them finding a weapon may have motivated him to flee from the police. But anyway, he crashed a car. And as he was running from the car, according to reliable witnesses and more than one, he threw his weapon down, and the police caught up with him and blatantly just shot him, blankly shot him multiple times.
25.
25 times.
Right.
Was it, how many police shot him to get 25 shots into him?
I mean, there were two officers.
Oh, two officers. So
Right.
between the two of them, they got
Right,
they got 25 shots.
right.
Empty their guns.
Right.
Okay, and this was 2013.
Right.
Okay.
And then that, you know, in terms of multiple shots into people's bodies, takes me back. I know we may not have that. This is outside of St. Louis, but in New York, with a case that became well known, Amadou Diallo, where he was shot over 40-some times by the police and found not to have no weapon or nothing. He was in a phone booth and pulled out his wallet, and the police, discharged that weapon so many times into his
discharged
body.
the weapon
Into his body, shooting him that multiple times.
and because he pulled out a wallet.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he was getting ready to show him an ID that he was who he was, and 41 bullets in 8 seconds. So you really have to go some to figure out why that all was necessary.
And with Amadou Diallo, that sparked protest across the country, didn't it?
Yes, a little bit. Right,
yeah,
right,
absolutely.
right.
That was, and when was that? That was in 1999.
Oh,
That
wow.
sounds about right. I was trying to remember if it was before Louima case, but I mean that was another high-profile New York case where he wasn't killed, but he certainly was sodomized and tortured by New York cops. I mean, he had been sodomized with a toilet plunger.
Toilet plunger.
And that was indicative of the kind of base behavior that we have in the police departments across this country.
So police departments have different ways that they try to extract information from somebody or just injure somebody.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what in 2014, which is fresh in everybody's mind, Michael Brown was killed on August the 9th. Why did that spark so much more response than all of these other cases that we've heard about?
Well, you mean particularly here in this area. Mind you, the Marilyn Banks case roused a whole lot of, the kind of significant numbers, but it was not as ongoing in terms of the protests. Michael Brown was just a flashpoint of all of the anger and the frustrations of people being constantly harassed by, police departments, not only in Ferguson, but throughout the St. Louis area. And so with the blatant murder of Mike Brown, and especially with his body being laid to on the ground for over 4.5 hours after being shot and killed by killer cop Darren Wilson, that's the anguish of the people, and I'll never forget that first day I was there, and the anguish of the people seeing that and the trauma, for
complete disrespect,
total, and then the call for the militarized police,
immediate militarization of
with
the
the police dogs and the snipers and the shotguns. And
so it's like saying, if we want to kill someone, we're going to do it, and you shut up and I don't want to hear any complaints about it.
It was really reminiscent of the day of lynching, how they would lynch a black man and have him hanging in the tree for long periods of time. So this is actually another legal form of lynching as, I see.
Yeah, and back then, just like, we did, we looked at it, we watched it, and that's supposed to send a message to us that this could happen to you. But I think what they didn't understand is that all the factors that led to that day, not just the shooting was the spark, but you have like days and weeks of harassment. We later found out, some of us already knew, the kind of harassment of people in racial profiling that was then economic injustices based on all these citations and court costs. Just triple, quadruple oppression every day for folks in Ferguson and anybody that's going through Ferguson. So those just went up. I mean,
okay. Let's get to a few more cases of that gained national consequence. Jamala, what happened to Oscar Grant in 1999?
Oscar Grant was a young man that was out New Year's Eve with a bunch of friends, and there was an incident, and the BART officers took him, the Bay Area Rapid Transit officers, which are, in many cases, rent-a-cops, had him and some other folks on the platform, and the one police officer claimed that he thought he was tasing Oscar Grant, and actually he was loading a bullet into his body, and so that again was captured on a video, a camera, and went viral, and people also had the same kind of eruption there.
Well, was anything done to the person who killed him?
I would say no. I mean, he was convicted. I think he got 2 years.
2 years, okay.
Because the whole thing about, intention, you have to prove, meditation, premeditation, you got to prove intent. And he kept saying, I thought I had my taser.
I didn't mean to do it.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Not many of us would get off with the defense, I didn't mean to do it.
Right.
Zaki, what happened in 2012 with Rekia Boyd in Chicago?
Well, that was an incident in the park, I think it was on the south side of Chicago, where some young people were out having a good time, making some noise, and an off-duty police officer who was off-duty, I guess got very perturbed about what was happening, and some words had been exchanged between him and some of the people in the park. He pulled his pistol out, shot into the crowd, shooting and killing Miss Boyd. And just most recently, a judge allowed him to walk free based on the fact that he had been charged with manslaughter, from what my sources, instead of homicide, instead of murder. And that was the basis for his decision. I'm talking about the judge.
No, did the police officer who shot him, did he live in the neighborhood?
I believe so. I'm not absolutely
I'm
sure.
not sure either.
I think I read that he lived in the neighborhood, and he was perturbed that he came out the night before, or a few nights before, and said, because people were being a little rowdy, and he said, what do I have to do, kill one of you people to get you to shut up?
No. Okay. Well, then. But then, if that be the case, then again, that speaks to the mindset of many people who's supposed to serve and protect. And in fact, there's a thuggish element in many of the police departments, as I just wanted to put that word out, thuggish,
right?
Because they're trying to associate the peaceful protesters as thugs, even from the President of the United States and others. And so the real thugs are those who constantly harass and brutalize and maim and kill young black youth throughout America.
Okay, Jamala, one of the most recent cases, last one we're going to cover in the show, is Walter Scott, April 2015 in South Carolina. And now what happened to Walter Scott?
Walter Scott had been stopped by the police, and the interesting thing is he really had no physical contact with the officer, because as he started to get out the car, according to the video, the officer told him to get back in, and so when the officer went to his car to run the plates, Walter Scott made a run for it. It's not clear why. There was some suggestion that he was behind in child support, but it seems to be more to the story. But he took off running for whatever reason, and was shot in the back 6 or 7 times by that police officer, who then proceeded, once he realized what he had done, to drop a taser gun and create a police report that said that there was a tussle, and Scott had taken the gun, taser gun from him, and he had to shoot him. So you see, unbeknownst to them, you see this being videotaped, and you see him drop the taser gun by Scott's dead body, and then you see a black police officer come up and handcuff a dead man as if he poses some kind of threat. So, the whole thing is just bizarre and indicative of the fact that it's not just individual cops, it's really the system, because they had already sort of created the police department police report to justify what had happened, and had it not been for the videotape, that report would have stood as the truth of the matter.
And that suggests that reports like that are being filed all over the country.
Oh, every day, every day.
Okay, we're going to take a break, and we're going to see a very brief movie, less than a minute, of students demonstrated from McClure High School, McClure, within a week of the non-indictment of Darren Wilson. We'll be back in just a minute.
McClure? What's up, man? Hey, you gotta listen,
Welcome back to Green Times. This episode is Black Lives Lost. I'm host Don Fitz, and with me I have Zaki Baruti with the Universal African Peoples Organization. Jamala had to dash off, but Zaki, you've been working on this issue since 1983, so we can say that you're very familiar with it and you can cover this.
Right. Well, actually, it's been past 1963. I used to, my first involvement around police murder occurred in 1969.
69.
With the murder of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark in Chicago.
Oh, yes, and that was with the Black Panther Party.
Right.
And it was very clear that that was orchestrated and that they were just...
Absolutely.
Was Fred Hampton, was he the person in his bed?
Yes, Fred Hampton was the head of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. The FBI, along with the Chicago police, raided the home at 5 in the morning, and it was proven that after extensive investigation that they had shot into the flat where they had lived at. It was several people living there, over 99 times. And
99 shots.
99 shots. And I also found out that a police informer had actually put a drug into Fred Hampton's drink to make sure that he would be sedated for that evening. And they had already had a
So they knew that he was out when they shot, they pumped all the bullets into it.
And that caused great outrage all across this country. And that was actually my first organizing protest, where in East St. Louis I organized a rally in solidarity to what had happened and through the streets of East St. Louis, Illinois.
Well, we can just begin a discussion of what we ought to do about it, what the responses are. And of course, after the killing of Michael Brown, there's a federal commission and there's a state commission. There's all sorts of discussions about doing this and doing that. But it would seem to me that one of the first things, or the ultimate thing that needs to be done, is there needs to be consequences to police who do this, that they ought not to just, if there's no indictments and if there's no convictions, there's no jail time, is anything else really going to make any difference?
You hit the nail right on the head in terms of, first of all, it has to be the will of the American society to put pressure on all of the judicial figures and the prosecutors to, as you say, penalize those thuggish police officers who wantonly maimed and injured and killed innocent black people.
Well,
but that has not been the case because there's a code, several things, a code of silence among those who are supposed to serve and protect. I'm talking about the police officers. And then you have a judicial system, a court system, that basically condones it. So we're looking at a twofold problem.
It's very serious. And one of the things which I see is a part of the problem is that the media always wants to redirect attention. Whenever there's somebody killed and then there's demonstrations and somebody throws a rock or throws a bottle or fires a shot up into the air, then the focus is on the demonstrators and not on the original person who was killed.
The absolute cause. And another thing in terms of with what's happening currently now, all people have to do is go back into the 60s where there were many rebellions all across this country. The media try to classify them as riots. I like to always use the word rebellions. And out of that those rebellions of the cities, there was a federal commission called the Kerner Commission, which issued out an extensive report that really cited police violence on the rampage, as well as deeper social issues causing for people such as unemployment, poor educational system, health issues, and et cetera, that caused many of the eruptions that occurred then. And they're also popping up today because many of those issues from that particular time have never really been addressed.
Well, that commission basically was looking at systemic solutions, not just. But have Supreme Court decisions interfered with that? And what I'm thinking of in particular is that if somebody wants to show racism in terms of a pattern, doesn't the Supreme Court say, well, you can't really show racism in a pattern of stopping black people, of shooting more black people? You have to show that there's individual racism by an individual officer in a specific case. And doesn't that make it very difficult to deal with this whole issue in a systemic way?
Absolutely. And but again, it speaks to the institutions of America being in of itself racist to allow that. And then when you look at the Supreme Court, the people who make those decisions, basically up until just recent time, older white men, you know, with the exception of a little bit of change of the court composure now. So obviously there's a condoning of the wild kinds of behavior that's taken place from those who, again, are supposed to serve and protect. I always maintain in some of my pronouncements that what has happened is that instead of the overt lynchings of the KKK, that many of the KK mentality people have taken off the white robes and put on blue uniforms.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we're going to take a break. We're going to see a very short movie about a demonstration within a week of the non-indictment of Darren Wilson for killing Mike Brown in St. Louis. I think this took place on December the 10th. We'll be back in just a minute.
Hey, calling for due process for all Americans.
Today is International Human Rights Day. I come to celebrate all lives, and today especially because of the loss of black and brown lives, but all lives matter.
All lives matter. Stop the killing. Today the world is demanding the killer cops that killed Mike Brown and Eric Garner must be indicted and arrested.
We need more prayers. We need more prayers. We need to change the laws. We need to make our voices heard.
Welcome back to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz, and with me I have Zaki Baruti with the Universal African Peoples Organization, and we're talking about Black Lives Lost. We've given several examples, but I think it's very important to emphasize in the show that these are just a tiny, tiny minority of the hundreds, if not thousands, of stories of young black people being killed, and sometimes older black people being killed by the police for doing a very minor offense or doing absolutely nothing whatsoever. Now, Zaki, we've covered a lot of territory in the parts of the program that we've been talking about. What would you like to leave the viewers with? What do you think is really important?
Well, first of all, I think the viewers have to understand that everyone needs to get involved to change the culture that's taking place in terms of with the police violence that's look like it's even increasing and multiplying. And to that end, we also have to get to some of the core of the problems. And one of the things that a later showing possibly like to get into the disproportionate number of white officers working in our communities, which leads to many of the incidents that we're dealing with. Okay, we certainly will be having another show that in a week viewers will be able to see. We'll be covering different cases, and we'll be going into more depth in terms of what sort of alternatives that people have. But I think we've covered a whole lot of issues now. We've covered a whole lot of cases. And one of the things which is interesting is that while we're covering all of these cases, we're taping in early 2015. And as the months go by, by the time viewers see this, there might be many, many new cases. I want to thank everybody for tuning into Green Time. I want to thank Zaki for being here, and I hope you tune in same time next week.